how do you handle yourself? How do you show up as a human being, as a sales leader, as a salesperson under pressure?
Hello Sales Nation and welcome to the Salesman Podcast Live in partnership with HubSpot and recorded at the Sales Innovation Expo in London. On today's show we have Jim Rees. He is an emotional intelligence expert and he's showing how we can win at sales by leveraging emotional intelligence. It is a key differentiator in the marketplace and there's a whole lot more to go at in this episode. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. You can find out more about Jim over at thelongandtheshortofit.biz. Everything else that we talk about is available in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with all that said, let's jump into today's show. Jim, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Lovely to be here, Will.
I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to dive into this topic of emotional intelligence. Just from our 10-minute conversation before we click record, there's so much to go here, so we'll see where we get through. But I want to give you a somewhat of an open-ended question here to get started.
Okay.
And that is, for B2B sales professionals, right now, 2017, here at the Sales Innovation Expo, is emotional intelligence more important than ever to close these larger B2B deals?
My belief is yes, and of course I'd say that, given that I'm qualified in emotional intelligence. But I've been working in the corporate world as a coach for the last 15 years, and more data has continued to sort of gather momentum. And the data is absolutely overwhelming, that the soft skills, the stuff that we actually couldn't really measure that well previously, that it's overwhelming that actually it is a complete and utter game changer. You know, how you interact moment by moment in those conversations that you're having with your clients has a massive impact. And of course, we know you're a sales guy. We know that people buy people. So there's an energy, there's an energy transfer from one to the other, and a lot of that stuff is all about emotional intelligence. So the long answer, yes. The short answer, yes. It does make a difference.
And is this a differentiator for B2B salespeople in that if they've got their product set, and a lot of products are commoditized now that we live in the internet age, you can get them from anywhere, from multiple sources. For the individual salesperson to hit their targets, regardless of what the company's doing to help them, what marketing is doing to help them, the lead generation efforts, is emotional intelligence perhaps a differentiator and a leverage point for them to become better at selling as opposed to do more of selling, if that makes sense?
I'm just going to continue to say yes.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Why is that so then?
Yeah, why? That's a even better question, and thank you. So, why is it so? When things are going swimmingly well, it's easy to sell stuff. You're in flow. It's effortless. But actually, what's interesting about emotional intelligence is where it really comes to its fore is under pressure, when shit happens and curveballs are being thrown. How do you handle yourself? How do you show up as a human being, as a sales leader, as a salesperson, under pressure? Because we use the fingerprint as a metaphor. So every time I pick my cup or my glass up, I leave my DNA. It's unique to me. Every interaction I have, I leave my personal fingerprint in that situation. So under pressure, how am I showing up in front of that client when I'm under pressure? Can I handle my state, my emotional intelligence under pressure? And that's the difference that makes the difference.
And should we be able to handle all of this, or should we be going into, and a genuine question, should we be going into sales meetings with a flurry of butterflies, or should we be zen?
Yeah, I think there are various techniques, and most people know the techniques. The people that are really good at their craft, the salespeople, they just slow their breathing down. They pay attention. They don't arrive right on time before the meeting. They're relaxed. They're calm. They use their posture. There's a handshake that goes with someone that's a bit more confident than the wet hand, the wet fish handshake we've all experienced over the years. So there's a difference. I'll go back to the point of energy. There's an energy that goes with someone that is really on their A game compared to someone that's and sweaty and stressed. Who wants to buy from A or B?
And does this obviously there's multiple levels here. Does this bottom level come down to confidence? Of you don't want to deal with someone who doesn't seem confident, because clearly how can you have trust in them if they're not confident in what they're saying and doing?
Yeah, completely. I mean, again, another way to unravel this, to demystify the whole thing. So we're talking about emotional intelligence, and before we started, we were having a bit of a chat about, well, some companies don't like the term emotional intelligence. It's sort of like, hey, hello, what is it? It's really, in essence, it's mindset. It's what is your attitude as a salesperson when you're in front of that client? How do you show up? So if you ask the question, what are the attributes of someone that is world class at what they do? And when you ask that question to any audience, they come back with, they're motivated, they're excited, they're inspirational, they're engaged, they're great listeners. When you do that list and write them all out, actually you look at that list and you say, actually 80% of that at least is attitudinal, is emotional intelligence. So when going back to your original question, is it a game changer? Yeah, absolutely it is. Yeah, because what else can you, most corporates spend so much money on upskilling their people, sending them on another negotiations course, and they're not really doing enough on the attitudinal stuff, on the mindset piece of it all.
I think it goes even to, I think if you are getting sent on negotiation courses, you're in a great company. A lot of my experience is you get a whole lot of training on the product, then you get a little bit more on the features and benefits, and then it's poof, out you go. and there's, I don't know whether you would call it a myth or a stereotype, but you have the charismatic sales professional, which is inspirational, motivational, as you described then, and it's, people try and hire that charisma as opposed to develop it into people. Is that because it's difficult to develop into people, or, well, okay, so I can see you shaking your head here.
No, it's easy.
Everyone who's listening.
I think it's easy to develop a really good mindset.
What's the starting point then? For everyone listening, let's get super practical. So they're driving or to the office, or they're driving on the way to a big sales meeting now. Hopefully they've done as you described, of they're like 10-15 minutes early. They can have like 5 minutes in the car, whether they're listening to music to get them like pumped up. And rocking and rolling, or however they go about it. Let's use this example. So they're driving to a sales meeting. What can we do listening to this on the way to the drive so that we show up in a better state than what we would have done otherwise?
Fantastic question. You put attitude on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being really poor, like a bit like Eeyore. Remember Eeyore? Oh, thanks for noticing me. Oh, and you put yourself at a 10 like Tigger. There's a difference in the energy that emits. So if you're playing from a 10 on this attitudinal scale, that'll have a massive impact on your behavior, which is what you do and say, which will then have a massive impact on the results that show up. So if you're playing from a 1, if you go into that meeting with that clammy handshake and your posture's really poor and you're playing from a 1, you'll do and say things at that level, and then of course you probably won't get the results that you're looking for. So you can absolutely manipulate where you are on that scale of 1 to 10 by doing the breathing, by being aware of your posture, and there are smiling. Make sure you smile. These all trigger off serotonin, which has a massive impact on you physically. That's all short-term stuff. The more pervasive stuff, which you'll be familiar with, is what language are you? What internal dialogue have you got going on in your head? What are you saying to yourself on your journey into that meeting? Are you saying this is going to go phenomenally well? They love what I've got. They're gonna lap this up. They're gonna be so excited when I come out of there. Or are you saying to yourself, if you were playing from 1, oh dear, they're going to ask me some tricky questions. Oh, they're not going to like this. They're going to pick holes in this. The price is wrong. A whole list of things that are a catalog of disaster. And here's the interesting thing. We get to choose where we play life from. When we wake up in the morning, this model, the scale of 1 to 10, is in play from the moment we wake up and until we go to bed at night. And we have a choice where we play life from, whether we play from a 1 or whether we play from a 10. It's actually as simple as that, but it's as simple as that. It's a simple model, but it's sometimes tricky to do.
So is the skill being conscious in the moment and refocusing yourself and being this way, versus, I think a lot of people listening now will go, makes total sense, and then 5 minutes later, they've just not put it into practice. And then they see the end results and they go, should have done differently.
Yeah, and that's all awareness, isn't it? So it's about calibration. So what I love about the scale of 1 to 10 is you can calibrate immediately. You can say, okay, where am I? Check in with yourself and say, where am I right now? Well, I'm a little bit stressed. I'm a bit anxious. take a few deep breaths. That slowed my heart rate down a little bit. I'm not sweating so much. I'm not shaking so much. All those things.
So as you just said that, I, without even thinking of it, just took a deep breath and just felt 10 times better for it.
Yeah, and you do, because of
interesting.
course you're supplying more oxygen to your brain, which allows you to access more of your creativity, more of your innovation. So playing from a 10 actually allows you to access more of your potential, and that's the whole idea with the scale of 1 to 10. Easy model. Can be a little bit tricky to sort of implement, but we teach that to teams when we're working with with a team. We teach those strategies as to how to manage their state more effectively under pressure. You don't need those things when it's all going well. You're in flow. You don't even think about it. But actually, what you want to do is be able to be in flow under pressure, and be able to access more of your potential under pressure.
And is that a learned skill that you have to practice over and over, of being in that stress state and then bring yourself down? Or what I'm trying to get at is this an on-off switch, or is it something that we all need to work on consistently?
Yeah, my belief is it's an on-off switch, because the ABC of success is our model, our framework, and A is awareness, and an awareness of where am I right now? What's going on for me right now? What's going on for the client? All my surroundings. What's my awareness? And how aware am I of how I'm feeling, my perception of the client that I'm meeting, all those dynamics. So awareness is king. Once you've got the awareness, you can then do something with it. And that's the difference between a successful person and someone that's not so great.
So you said it there. How do we tie this when we're not stressed, we're feeling great, but the client in front of us has just had a bombshell hit them before the sales meeting, or they're not happy, we've screwed up and we need to make amends for it? Is there a way to transfer? And I don't talk about, there's an element or potential element of like woo-woo-ness with some of this.
There is.
Talking about transferring energy, things
completely.
Like that. But is there a way that we can essentially calm them down and be empathetic and relate to them? And I don't know if this is like tricks and tactics, or whether it's, if you're inner and confident with yourself, they subconsciously get it and they fall into your persona. I don't know which way
your
around
spell.
it is. Yeah.
Your spell. I believe that there is a big element of that persona, that you're transmitting a certain energy, a certain frequency, a bit woo-woo, but stay with me, and that actually then makes them feel calmer. So if you notice that, and that's back to the awareness. If you notice that they're stressed and freaked out by stuff, whatever it might be, just take a breath, slow your pace down, ask them about them, calm them down, ask them how's their morning been so far, and, get into that before you get into what you've come there to sell them for. And
what happens when you do this? Because I'm going to ask you the question and then tell you my thoughts on it. You're essentially building rapport, aren't you? It's a quick. I've found from my experience, personal experience, medical device sales, when I'm selling to surgeons, if they're having a crazy day, I would immediately say, "Would you like me to come back another time?" kind of thing. I get that you're busy. I understand it. And 99% of the time, they're like, no. They then become aware of their state because you've been very, empathetic towards it. Yes. And then they calm down, and then you can grab a coffee and carry on the conversation.
Completely.
Is there a technique or hack or tactic to be able to do that? Should you always go into a conversation and ask how their day is before you try and ram your pitch down people's throats?
I think so. I think you've got to create that space, that rapport, and that can be done fairly quickly. A lot of that is about how you're showing up as a human being yourself. So again, you're transmitting. We're like batteries, and we're transmitting a certain energy, a certain frequency all the time. And if you want to get woo-woo, the neuroscience is backing all of this up. Every time we have a thought as a human being, every thought we have creates a chemical cascade. Yeah. So we're flooding our system with hormones, neuropeptides, all sorts of stuff. And if you're thinking positively, that's filling your body with good thoughts, happy thoughts, serotonin, and all those nice things. If you're thinking stressful thoughts, cortisol, etc., not good. So there's a choice, again, to be had. So it's about being deliberate with your thinking before you go into your meeting. It's really all in the pre-call. The old school days of, have you done a pre-call objective? Well, one of them is to get yourself in a good state.
Well, let's get the audience something practical on this. What should the pre-call checklist be So as I said, they've just arrived at the destination. They've got, say, 10, 15 minutes. What checklist should they go through before they walk through the hallway and speak to the receptionist and sit down for their meeting?
Yeah, I think it's an awareness of making sure that you've calibrated yourself. You've done your check-in of where am I on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yep.
Make sure that we talk about self-talk. When you ask that question, how many people talk to themselves? We have more conversations with ourselves than anyone else on the planet. So we all do the self-talk piece. What we're less aware of is how powerful affirmations are, where you're deliberately saying to yourself, this is going to go amazingly well. So you're almost faking it until you make it. So it's a strategy that a lot of world-class people use. I mean, athletes use it. I mean, my business partner, Mark Foster, if you think about all the stuff he did as a swimmer, 5-time Olympian, 8-time world record holder, when we talk about emotional intelligence or mindset, athletes, you see it show up in those individuals all the time. The person that wins gold medal compared to silver sometimes is such a fine margin that they can't do any more work in the gym or, lengths up and down the lane. What they can do is actually do the visualization, which is all mental stuff.
Yep.
And they can also do the mindset stuff, which is, what self-talk are they saying to themselves before they actually start that race? So the same thing applies in the corporate world.
I love this. So going back to the science here for a second, I know with the visualization side of things, when you visualize, if you're in a functional MMRI machine, whatever the acronym is, parts of your brain are lighting up that would physically move your legs and your limbs.
Completely.
If you're visualizing running. And this will make Elliot here behind the camera laugh. But I do these affirmations, and it's not something I consciously do. But for example, in the hotel this morning, I walked past the mirror and I'm like, I do host the world's biggest sales podcast.
That's very
I'll
cool.
say it over to myself over and over and over, and it's only when I don't do it proactively, and maybe I should. But it's only if I catch myself in the mirror, I'll go. It's almost me going, I am pretty good at this.
Yeah. Well, why not?
Yeah.
Talk yourself up instead of talk yourself down.
So this is what I want to ask here: is there a structure for an affirmation? Is there a best practice of way of phrasing or even tonality, or how we should say it?
The start of it, without any doubt whatsoever, and there's been research on this, is I am.
Okay.
I am. So you start the whole thing is I am an awesome salesperson. I am the world's best podcaster, etc. I am in that space. I am a phenomenal speaker. That stuff. So it's always in the positive and stated that you are already that, as opposed to, and then you have to then back it up with the feeling state that goes with you've already done that. So I am a phenomenal speaker. I would then also have to think about the feeling state that I would create when I'm in that space, when I am being that awesome speaker or that awesome podcaster.
I've got a theory on this. We won't dive into it too deep because it might take us totally off tangent, off topic. But I'll link to a video that represents this very well in the show notes to this episode. And it was this video that I watched, got me started on this, trying to understand this better, was describing that your left and your right side of the brain potentially have their own little voices, but you can only hear, I don't know which side, but you can only hear one of them. Your speech part of your brain's on one side of things. And so I have this theory, and there's somewhat research to back it up, which I can mention perhaps if that would be of interest, but you're almost telling the other side of your brain that doesn't have a voice what it should believe. And the way some of the experiments that they've done on this is, I think, I can't remember what it was, but there was, whether it was epilepsy or whatever it was, they were basically cutting through the cortex of these poor people before they understood the brain structure of it. This is in the 40s and 30s. And they were finding that if they put a board in between the person, so one eye would see one side, one hand would see the other side, and they would ask them to take their favorite vegetable or favorite fruit off the table, both hands would reach forward and pick up something totally different.
Yeah, wow.
And you've obviously got that link between your eyesight and your handedness are on the opposite sides of how your brain's structured. And so that led me to this of maybe we do have some kind of voice in one side that allows us to communicate the other. And as we're doing these affirmations, things like that, we're essentially giving one side of our brain a bit of a kick in the arse, and the vocal part of us that understands all this. It's almost like you've got doubts one side and you've got all your hopes and dreams on the other.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the science would put it as specific as that, but that's how I think about it, and that's how it makes sense to me anyway.
No, that completely makes sense, because of course, Steve Peters' book, The Chimp Paradox, he talks about the chimp on the shoulder, the healthy one that says, you're phenomenal, you're great, you're going to do this, you're going to kill it, and then you've got the other one on the other shoulder saying, you're crap, you're not that great, you've never been good, you're never going to be good, and also you've got all the past conditioning, which is also a dilemma for most of us as human beings. Look before you leap. It's too good to be true. Don't bite off more than you can chew. All the conditioning that's taken place as young whippersnappers when you grow up, and then life experience happens, we end up getting conditioned to believe that actually we might not be able to do stuff. So I have a passionate belief that we've got inner greatness has been planted there as a seed when we're first born. And then unfortunately, a lot of that gets dampened down or perhaps even eroded over time, through life experiences, etc. And it's our job as human beings, as leaders of your field and my field, to actually go out and inspire and reconnect people to that inner greatness. That's part of the role as a coach, certainly. And I'm sure that's, perhaps one of your sneaky little aspirations as well, is to inspire people to believe in their inner greatness.
For sure. Well, the whole premise of the show is not to help necessarily people hit targets and commissions, and it's why we have people like yourself on, is to help people thrive in sales. It's to help people enjoy what they're doing, get out of it if it's not the right thing for them, and bring more people in who it is suited to. And just final thing before we wrap up here. So all this preconditioning. So I know for us, and my two brothers are here behind the cameras, for everyone who's watching and listening to this, helping me out here. Something that I'm going to watch their faces as I say it, but something our dad always says is money doesn't grow on trees. And obviously he's, if we were as a kid and we would ask for something, what he'd be trying to instill in us is that you need to earn it versus you just get it, which makes total sense, and none of us are parents, so it's probably a different story.
Well, I've got 6 kids,
so
you're
nodding, so it makes sense. But I consciously became aware of this when I was in sales, and you're having all these weird thoughts come about money as you're going, well, do I feel worthy of closing this million pound deal with the NHS? And how I got rid of that, which was always going on in the back of my mind, was that money's made out of paper. It literally does grow on trees.
Yes.
It's a ridiculous saying to have in the first place.
Yep.
So is there a process, or is there a way to become aware of any of these sayings that are going on in our background that we've been preconditioned with? We'll wrap up with this, because that's another 4-hour conversation.
Yeah, it's all about awareness. So it's all about, what are the patterns of behavior that I run as a human being? So, typically what we do when we're working one-on-one with leaders is to do an online questionnaire and measure their emotional intelligence, which then helps us understand what are the patterns of behavior that they run as human beings, as leaders. Once you understand that, you can then dive backwards, do a little bit of a 101, not really a couch session, but do a sort of an exploration around where did that come from? Where did those thoughts, those beliefs come from that make you believe that and think that and act a certain way as a result? And then you can actually then start changing it by understanding. So it's all awareness. Awareness is the first piece, then challenging their beliefs, and then the C is commitment. How committed are they to actually change, to evolve as individuals, as leaders?
Yeah, I guess, and we'll wrap up with this, because that structure also ties in if you have a product that is going to be perfect for a potential customer, and it's a change game that you need to influence them, change their mind, that to see your perspective, your angle on things. That is the real skill, I think, in sales, when you can make them aware of it, when you can have that little bit of, I don't know how you might describe it different way, but positive conflict with them, and go back and forth, and that puts you in a position as a consultant versus someone who's just pitching and after the commission. And I think there's real value in that for the audience to kind of take that approach to sales as well. And I've got one final question I ask everyone that comes on the show. So Jim, I'm going to ask you this.
Go.
And that is, and I know you're not that out and out right now, that's perhaps a salesperson, but you've got that kind of history in that background, so you'll have context on this. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling? Great.
That's a beautiful question. What a beauty. And I know exactly what it would be. It would be take more personal responsibility for my own development. I sort of got stuck in a little bit of a rut. I became a bit of a mood hoover, a bit of an Eeyore early on in my career, when I wasn't being developed by my company that I was doing really well. I'd shot to the top of the sales team as a sales leader, and then I wasn't being developed, and I couldn't understand why. And then I realized, actually, well, I can take some ownership and personal responsibility to actually develop myself. So what books were I, at the time was I reading? What CDs back then? Not audio downloads. I'm an old boy. What CDs can I buy, or tapes, even tapes, that I can use to actually accelerate my own performance? And I wasn't taking any personal responsibility for that. I was expecting to be developed. And I think nowadays, in such a competitive environment, we have to take personal responsibility and say, okay, I'm going to read some books on this topic. I'm going to get better at selling. I'm going to get better at mindset stuff. If this is a game changer, then I'm going to go out and find some of the people to hang around with that have got a really good mindset around this stuff. So that would be the thing I'd sneak back in time and say, hey, you little grasshopper, take personal responsibility for your personal development.
And final thing on that, is there any books you recommend? Is there a starting point to all of this personal development that you think is, for anyone who hasn't read any books on, I'm going to air quote, but self-help or something along those lines? Is there any books you'd start with that you'd recommend?
One of my favorites is Brendan Burchard's book called The Charge. He's a coach himself, but actually he's written the 10 motivating factors for life and professional people. So I felt that there was a really well-structured book. For leaders, here's, I'll sneak another book in, Leadership and Self-Deception. So for leaders, certainly read that book. That's an amazing book, really easy to read book. But there are so many. I mean, I'm really upset that I've had to choose maybe one or two, but there you go. So The Charge and Leadership and Self-Deception.
Well, I'll link to both of them in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Jim, tell us a little bit more where we can find out about you and everything else that you're doing as well.
So we have a business called The Long and the Short of It, which is myself and Mark Foster, the swimmer, who I've mentioned earlier. And that focuses on three things. We do a lot of keynote speaking, in the corporate world for organizations, which is typically the sort of 45 minutes to an hour or so, which is where you sort of motivate, the whole team, the whole organization. And my belief around that stuff is they are great. They're great fun. They're great fun for us to do. The challenge is that they don't sustain that energy that you get at that conference. It's sort of over time, over about 6 to 8 weeks later, it sort of dies off and people are back in their patterns of behavior. So the other aspect that we do that's part of our business, is a core part of our business, is the one-to-one executive coaching, the performance coaching stuff. I don't know whether you watch Billions at all.
Yeah.
So it's the performance coach piece of, so that's a piece that we, really enjoy. And then there's the team development, the facilitated sessions around developing a more cohesive team with leaders. Because over the last 15 years or so, there are so many teams, and it's a bit of a sort of a catch-all, but so many teams are dysfunctional. They aren't cohesive. They don't trust one another at a level that allows them to then get through some of the other barriers around, the dynamics of teamwork.
Makes total sense. I've been in those teams, Jim. I've been in them, and I guess at the time, it's almost a perspective of, well, it's sales, it's business, it's dog eat dog. We're not pulling the same direction because we shouldn't. This is the corporate world, and clearly that's not the most effective way for everyone as the whole unit to have success.
The analogy I like is, instead of the guns pointing inwards at each other and my teammates, it's guns pointing outwards to the competition and the competitors. So take a shot at them before you take a shot at your mate that you're meant to be working with.
Makes total sense. Well, with that, Jim, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
It's been a pleasure. Whoa, what a start.